My name's Carol. I'm one of the ship's crew here at Jamestown Settlement. We're here to talk a little bit about our reconstruction of Godspeed. What you're looking at behind me is our current reconstruction of Godspeed, the middle size of the three ships that brought those settlers to Virginia in 1607. This is our museum's third version of Godspeed. This one was built in Rockport, Maine in 2006. And if you saw our Susan Constant video, the main thing you'll notice is that this ship is quite a bit smaller than Susan Constant. Now, she's actually a very similar ship. Her hull construction is very similar. The rigging is almost identical to Susan Constant's, it's just that everything is on a much smaller scale. John Smith said that the Godspeed was a 40-ton vessel. Now, what does that mean? 40 tons is a measure of volume rather than weight. A ton, T-U-N, is a size of barrel, or they would have said cask. A ton size cask can hold 252 gallons, can be almost as big as me. So that ship can carry 40 of those large casks, or its equivalent in volume. It was also recorded that there were 52 men on Godspeed on that 1607 voyage, so let's go aboard and see what that would have looked like. So here we are on the bow, or the front, of the ship. Now, if you remember from the Susan Constant video, you saw my crewmate Kaya standing in the beakhead, which is the pointed forward part of the ship here, right behind me. This is, like Susan Constant, this is a place to handle some of the lines. You might go out to unfurl or furl that spritsail there. Remember, that's a balancing sail to keep the bow of the ship oriented the way you want it to be. It's where you might ease yourself, as John Smith said. You're just going to be doing all of this on a much smaller scale than you would on Susan Constant. Now, as I'm walking aft, this simple machine that I'm about to trip over is the Windlass. This is a winch. This is a tool to help you pick up heavy things, whether that's cargo, whether that's raising the yards. Very often it's associated with the anchor. So imagine wrapping the anchor line around the windlass, taking the windlass bars and turning the windlass. It's going to bring that line around and bring in whatever heavy thing it is that you're moving. Now, as we progress further aft, you see these things set into the deck. These are hatches, and they have a couple of different purposes. They are access to the lower decks. So the large one, back further aft, is for loading in cargo. This smaller one, sometimes called a scuttle hatch, is for people to have access up and down through to the other decks. These also are providing a lot of airflow through the ship. You imagine a wooden ship sitting in the water all the time is damp. You're going to have mold, you're going to have mildew, eventually there's going to be rot, and you can't stop that. But if you let a lot of air circulate through the ship, you can slow it down. We're going to go a little bit further aft. So now we are in the midship section, kind of the waist of the ship, and if you take a look at this main deck here, you might get a better idea of why we believe those passengers wouldn't have been let up on deck very often. If you look at the height of the rail that I'm sitting on, these are low. If you think about how ships move in the ocean, they're constantly in motion, they're pitching and rolling, they're leaning from one side to the other, they're heeling, which is perfectly normal. It's also pretty dangerous if you're untrained and don't know where to stand or how to move on the ship. So for everybody's safety, keep those passengers down below. Another reason why you might want to keep those passengers down below is the rigging right here. Godspeed has about 60 different lines on the ship. The sailors need to get to the correct line at the right time without moving people out of the way. Once again, keep those passengers down below. Now, when you look at the rigging here, you'll notice a distinct difference. We have two different colors here. The black lines would have been tarred, and this is going to protect them from the elements. It protects them from the sun, from the other weather. It's going to make them last longer. You don't have to replace them as often. These black lines are the standing rigging. They're cinched down very tightly, they don't move, and they're primarily here to support the masts, keep them in their position. Now, if tarring the line is going to protect them, is going to make them last longer, why haven't you tarred all the lines? Well, these lines that are in their natural state are called the running rigging. They run, they move. At some point, this is going to go through a block or a pulley or some sort of opening somewhere. These are up and down, moving the sails, moving the yards that hold the sails. If these lines are tarred, they're going to create a lot of friction. They're going to gum up those blocks or pulleys. So the running rigging is going to be left in its natural state. Now imagine that you are a new sailor on board Godspeed. Could be in your early teens. One of the first things you're going to learn is all about these lines. Every one of these 60 lines has a different name. It has a different specific job that it does. It belongs in one specific spot, and there's a way to handle it safely so you don't endanger yourself or the ship. This line right here is the starboard main clew garnet. It is on the starboard or right side of the ship. It is associated with the main mast, and it controls the clew or the bottom corner of a sail. The starboard main clew garnet always lives on this belay pin right here. It's belayed very neatly and then coiled and stowed to keep it tidy, to keep it out of the way, to keep it from tangling. So that's the kind of thing you're going to learn when you first step on board Godspeed as a new sailor. We're here on the quarterdeck of the ship. This is the stern, the back of the ship. This is where the officers might have spent some of their time. Remember, the captain, the master, the mates, they're concerned with what's going on out there on the water. They're also very concerned with what's happening on their ship. They're going to keep a close eye on the operations of the ship, and this is a good vantage point to do that from. The helmsman would be standing here. Now, the helmsman is not necessarily an officer. Just about any sailor on the ship can steer with a little bit of training. So they're steering with a tiller. Remember, the ship's wheel had not been invented in 1607. So the tiller will move from side to side. This ultimately turns the rudder in the water. Changing the direction of the rudder is what ultimately changes the direction the ship is traveling. Do remember, if you push the tiller to the starboard or the right side, the ship is going to go in the opposite direction, off to the left. That is a pretty important fact to remember as you're steering the ship. This cabinet in front of me is referred to as the binnacle. This is a storage place for your navigational tools. So the helmsman steering very likely is going to be relying on the compass part of the time. This is where that compass would be stored. Now, as a sailor, bear in mind, the crew is divided into two halves. Half of the crew is working while the other half is off duty. Every 4 hours, they're going to switch. So as a sailor, you're ready for your 4-hour watch to be over. So we're going to move forward and take a look at the ship's bell. This is the ship's bell. It is loud. It's good for getting people's attention. It's good for signaling emergencies. And remember, those crew members on board are going to be divided into two watches, two shifts, if you will. Half the crew is working while the other half is off duty. They'll work in a 4-hour shift called a watch. So as a sailor, once again, you are waiting for your 4 hours to be over with. In addition to getting people's attention, this is going to tell you the time. Imagine you were on the watch that starts at 8 o'clock. So you've come on your watch, it's 8 o'clock, you've worked, half an hour has passed, you've got a 30-minute sand timer to tell you that 30 minutes has passed, and now it's 8:30. This is what you're going to hear. That's going to tell you that it's now 8:30. It's half an hour into your watch. 30 minutes later, this is what you're going to hear. So now you know it's 9 o'clock, an hour into your watch. At 9:30, you know what's going to happen. But listen to the pattern. So they're going to travel in pairs. That way it's easier for you to keep track of those rings, to count the rings, to know what time it is. So when you hear 8 bells, that's 8 half hours, that's your 4-hour watch over. So now your watch is done, you're waiting for the other watch to come up on deck and relieve you, and you get to go down below and start your off watch time. So let's go down below and take a look what that would have looked like. So here we are down below decks. We are still in the stern of the ship. We're below the area where you saw the tiller and the binnacle. This is that mizzenmast that was kind of blocking our view of the water. This is where the officers would have had their berthing, their beds. This is the stern of the ship. Think about how the ship moves on the water. The bow up in the front is catching those waves first. It's pretty choppy up there. It can be kind of damp up there. So those lower ranking sailors, those common sailors, are going to be up in the bow. The officers are going to be here where it's a little more comfortable. Now back all the way aft is going to be the captain. This is the captain's quarters. In 1607, the captain was Bartholomew Gosnold, and that was a pretty good choice for the Virginia Company of London to have made. We know Captain Gosnold had actually trained as a lawyer. He had practiced law, but he also had a fair amount of experience as a ship's captain. We know he had explored the New England coast, so he knows the ocean. He at least somewhat knows the North American coast. So you're going to be in good hands with Bartholomew Gosnold as your captain. Now, as you look at the quarters, by our standards today, this is not the lap of luxury, but luxury is a relative term. So this is the nicest quarters on the ship. And the best part about being captain, you get to close the door. So here you are in the main hold, or the cargo hold of the ship. As you see, really it is a big open space. This is where you put your cargo, those large barrels that we talked about, that 40 tons of cargo. And as you see it right now, it is virtually empty. Remember, when these men get to Virginia, they need to build the settlement they're going to live in, starting with taking down the trees. So think about the cargo you need. Think about the tools and the weapons and the cooking pots and the food, the trade goods, planting materials. Everything you need to build and outfit a small settlement in Virginia is on these 3 ships. Don't forget, you need to feed those men on the way across the ocean. This is also the most likely place to put those passengers. Here is the real problem in 1607. They weren't making passenger ships. This ship is designed for cargo, not for people, so if you see, there's very little in the way of accommodating them. And if you remember, it was recorded that there were 52 men on Godspeed. We talked about the fact that there was about 13 crew. So if you did that math in your head, that's 39 passengers on a ship that's not designed for passengers. Now this ship can handle 39 passengers. That is not a problem. Can it handle them comfortably? That's a different question. You notice that there's not much light here. We actually have an extra electric light on right now to give a little bit of light for you to see. It's very crowded down here. Probably not a lot of room for movement. All the light is going to come through this closed grate right here. The ship is pitching and rolling and moving. It's going to be cold when they leave London in December. It's going to get stiflingly hot as they move through the Caribbean in the spring. But for all that, this is a reasonably safe way to go. Now let's go a little bit further forward and take a look where those sailors would have had their berthing. What we're looking at here now is the forecastle, the very bow or front of the ship. You might have heard the term forecastle. Now I'd like to point out one of the differences between this modern version of Godspeed and the historic Godspeed. This bulkhead here, this wall, would not have had this permanent opening in it. Likewise, the bulkhead that I walked through to get down to the cargo hold. These are to give easy access in modern times. So imagine this actually being 3 separate compartments down here. Now we're not going to go into the forecastle right now because a lot of our modern workings of the ship are stored up there. Historically, on the other side of this bulkhead would have been berthing for the common sailors, those lower ranking sailors, some storage, their personal effects, some of the gear they would have needed to get their job done. But if you would like to know what's on the other side of this wall, if you want to know a little bit about the modern workings of Godspeed, leave a comment down below. Let us know that. So we've talked a little bit about Godspeed, her voyage to Virginia in 1607, a little bit about what it might have been like to be a passenger, where you would have been reasonably safe down below, might have been a long and uncomfortable voyage for you. So I have a question for you. You are one of those settlers on board Godspeed for 4.5 months in 1607. What was your motivation for getting on that ship. What was your life like in England? What were you hoping to find in Virginia? And in the end, was it worth it? Now, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, subscribe. If you want, leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you.